Hello again, I'm John Landwehr. I'm the former mayor of Jefferson City, still trying to be a little bit relevant. And welcome back to another edition of Capital City Matters. When I was mayor, I did these shows to try to keep up with some current events, and Gloria Enlow at JCTV asked me to continue to do a few more shows, and it's been fun. And what we try to do in these shows is take about a half an hour and spend a little time breaking apart an issue, a topic, or a trend, and spending maybe a little more time on it than the average newscast or a program might be able to spend. And today, it's always fun to have a couple of not only interesting people, but also some good longtime friends. I've got Tom Piper and George Kopp, and George and Tom are going to talk today about a cult. Now, I say a cult, now it's really mainstream, but this group used to be kind of revolutionary and kind of secretive, and their identity revolved around computers. And George and Tom are going to talk today about the history and some of the trends about Macintosh or Apple computers. Tom, welcome. George, welcome. Your club is called Apple Jac, right? And that's just spelled A-P-P-L-E-J-A-C.
Correct.
What's the J-A-C stand for?
Apple is obvious. Joint, aid, and comfort is the rest of it.
Very good. And the Apple part relates, of course, to what we used to call Macintosh computers. Do they still call them Macintosh?
They're still called Macintosh, but we're looking at a broader range of devices now, where Apple makes a whole variety of things, starting first with the Apple II computer, that then sort of evolved into newer ones like the Mac, and now we have iPods and iPhones and iPads and such.
Going back now in the midst of time, how long has this group been active?
We started in December of 1984 as a very loose-knit group of people who were interested in the new Macintosh computer, because earlier that year the Mac had just been introduced right after the Super Bowl. And it was a revolutionary concept in computers with what's called the GUI interface, the graphic images, and it was very new, very different, and something that people wanted to learn a lot about. And so what we did with Tom Day and others from CenturyNext Computers is to sit down and say, let's put together a group of people who are interested in these strange computers, and we serve as a self-help organization, and it started very humble beginnings, and now we have over 80 members.
George, you come into this mix. You know, some of us are forced to use computers in our work, or we choose to use computers in our private lives. But computers in general for you have been not just an avocation, but a vocation. And you live in both worlds here, right? You're a PC guy and you're a Macintosh guy.
You're right.
How long have you been active with Apple Jac?
Well, I've been there from the very beginning, from when the club was formed. I purchased my first Macintosh in September of 1984, right after they first had come out and were available in the market. And I've used a Mac ever since. But I've also used PCs, and in fact, I work during the day typically doing support for PCs.
Go back in time a little bit, 1984, 1985. I jokingly referred to you guys as being a cult. You were really in a minority back then, Tom. It was a PC world, right?
Very much a PC world. But there's even a book out called The Cult of Macintosh. And it was a small, rather specialized group, and it was a very expensive device at that time. And, but it was so new, so different, and it really caught on with people in music, people in photography, and in art. And those beginnings sort of contrasted with the PC world, which was largely based on text and on things like spreadsheets and numbers and such. So we had graphics on one side and text on the other. And we sort of kidded back and forth that we represented, smiles of the artistic people and sort of the frowns of people working their way through statistics. But it seemed to catch on very quickly within those worlds.
You know, your description of the Mac and PC world, at least back in 1984, kind of reminds me of left brain, right brain. One could argue that the Mac was a little more left brain, creative. No, I've got it mixed up now. Is that right?
The other way, I think.
Right brain is creative. Right brain is creative, and left brain is more calculating.
Right.
George, as you began, you know, you were in the PC world 8 to 5. What was your impression as this Macintosh thing started to evolve? How did you see those two sides of your life evolve?
Well, at the time, John, it was pretty obvious that there were differences between the two machines. I mean, when the Mac first came out, it was graphical. It was all graphics on the screen. You could add pictures easily to documents that you're going to create and print. And on the PC, it was pretty much all just codes and text. And you know, I've written application programs for PCs and that have done a lot of different types of things. But the ability to be able to utilize graphics and utilize a bitmapped or a display that is mapped to every dot on the screen, to be able to do things just became revolutionary. And I think it was pretty easy to see that was the direction things were going to go. It's just that Apple got there first with the Macintosh. The PC folks followed along, and that's really the kind of computing that we have today, whether it's a Mac or a PC.
What's the acronym? WYSIG? You mentioned graphic.
WYSIWYG. Yeah, what you see is what you get.
Is that a way of describing when you talked about the graphic interface?
It certainly is. I think whenever a document was created on a PC in the early days, you typed in the text and you put codes associated with the text to make it do things that you wanted to see when you printed it out. For instance, you might have a code that you had to put in there to get text to be bold, another code to get text to be underlined. And when you looked at your computer display, you saw the codes. You didn't see underlines and bolds. Well, the Mac was completely different. The Mac was exactly what you saw on the screen was what you were going to get when you did an output. And that's really what changed it. For me, and it changed it for a lot of people, was the ability to be able to create something on a screen that you can visually look at and then send that to paper at the time or to the web today or later, and have it match exactly what you saw when you created it.
There are several people in our office that are now, including myself, that have moderate carpal tunnel syndrome, directly related to that little thing now that we take for granted, and that is our mouse. Sit here all day,
right,
you know, with the mouse. Tom, how did that? Was that a kind of a Mac phenomenon, or was that across the board?
Well, it really started with the Mac because Steve Jobs had visited the Xerox PARC project, and they had developed one of the first mice, but they hadn't commercially developed it. And being the visionary that Steve Jobs is, he saw the potential for marketing this and being able to add it to other functions with the Mac, so that the very thing that George was talking about that used to require typesetting, now you could do on this small little 9-inch machine, the very first Mac that came out. It was black and white at that time, and it was so revolutionary it started a whole new concept called desktop publishing. And before that time, you had typewriters, some of them had memory, but it was pretty unusual. But now it's fully within the control of the individual. And it was one of the very concepts that we believed in our club since the beginning, which was empowerment of the individual and being able to control that image that you wanted to create. And so the mouse was one of the many devices that have been developed since then. And of course, although others have used it first, the touchpad has become something that has probably helped to solve the carpal tunnel syndrome problem, and it's created a whole new market that is just wonderful.
George, back when the club started, we talked a little bit about joint aid and comfort.
Comfort, yes.
Comfort. That's interesting that you would take that on as a mission. I'm sure the club has evolved, but over time, what do you meet monthly?
Yes, the group meets monthly. We meet on the first Tuesday of every month. During the school year, we meet at Lewis and Clark on the first Tuesday at 7 p.m. And we have a different topic that we cover at each meeting. Anything from related to the new Apple operating system at this next meeting that we're going to talk about called Lion, to gadgets that people might want to purchase for Christmas, for a Christmas gift. We try to vary the topics up. These days, it's varied between Macintosh topics and topics of other Apple devices like the iPad and the iPhone. And we provide kind of a program of information for people that they can come in and learn a little bit. They can talk to other people, and we always give an opportunity for people to ask questions at our meetings. So if you have a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone and you're having a problem, it's a perfect opportunity to come and be able to get your problem solved.
It sounds like it's kind of a mix. It's not strictly a lecture, but then again, it's not just this social group of people sitting around hanging out. It sounds like the expectation or the desire is that anybody who comes is going to have a neat way to get some information that might be of help to them.
Certainly. In fact, I think you could probably look at it more from a training experience standpoint. You know, when we try to provide the program, we will show people how to do things or show them how things can be done in a particular application or whatever the topic of the month is on, and give them the opportunity to be able to learn that themselves and take that back home and be able to use it in their own work so that they can be more productive with their computers that they have. And it works fairly well. It gives people the opportunity to be able to learn in kind of an easy-going setting that is more of a family-oriented friend setting than it is an actual training course.
Meet once a month.
Yes.
And what's the website, by the way? Art's probably going to kind of put it up here a couple of times, but just real quick, if somebody wanted to find out more about the club itself, the website is
www.applejac.org.
Applejac.org.
Right, and that's applejac.org.
Very good. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to go back to 1984. Tom referenced a certain ad, and it's an ad that changed the world. We'll be right back.
In America, you are not required to offer food to the hungry or shelter to the homeless. There is no ordinance forcing you to visit the lonely or comfort the infirm. In fact, nowhere in the Constitution does it say you have to provide anything for anybody. Thank you for all you've given. Imagine what more could do.
Welcome back to Capital City Matters, and our guests today are Tom Piper and George Kopp from the local Apple Jac Computing Club. And we were talking about the origins of the club and also the first years of Macintosh computing. And Tom referenced a certain Super Bowl ad that the Macintosh cult figures play again and again just to get themselves enthused. And I think we're set up to show that now. This is 1984 Super Bowl.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We created for the first time in all history a garden of pure ideology where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
That's great, Tom. Thanks for bringing that along. My wife Peggy is an avid Macintosh computer fan, and sometimes I'll catch her when she doesn't think I'm there, and she'll be out with a hammer in the backyard, kind of
spinning it.
no, I'm kidding you. That whole clip kind of symbolizes the mentality of the early Macintosh group, because you had talk about the symbolism.
Yeah, and you know, people have to understand the time. I mean, you know, at the time, computers were big things in large rooms that that typically were sold by IBM, and they were very expensive. And you went to buy one, you know, and the people that sold it to you wore a suit and a tie, and it was very, very business oriented and stodgy, you could even say. And Apple tried to open up the computer use to the rest of the world, to people, to the average person. So that people would feel comfortable in using a computer. Because back then people didn't use computers. They didn't even know what computers were in many cases. And so it was an ad built specifically to be able to gather that interest in people toward having a computer of their own.
What was interesting was that about 10 years ago, this same ad was modified to introduce yet another revolutionary product called the iPod. And what the distinction you would see is that there is now a set of headphones and an iPod on the person of this woman who is swinging the sledgehammer. And it was very, very interesting when they did that, and very thoughtful. But again, yet another revolution in handheld devices with the iPod.
Now, in '84, they were worlds apart. Mac was big into graphics. PCs were big into numbers and classical computing. Over time, I remember, you know, early on, I mean, if you were buying a computer, you had to decide, were you Mac or you PC? About 15 years later, though, and in the last 10 years, those worlds have converged. From a technological standpoint, what happened technologically that allowed two originally different things to become blended now, to where we really don't make that distinction so much anymore?
Well, I think part of it is that graphical user interface. I think the ability for people to be able to use a mouse. People have become comfortable with a mouse. So that a mouse and pointing to something that looks like something real on the screen rather than just a piece of text or a cell in a spreadsheet. You know, and the cost of technology has also made it available for more people, so that PCs or PC computers now can have that same technology, and they've been able to reduce the price down, so the price is much more competitive. So today, I mean, basically the graphical interface that we see on the Mac and the graphical interface in Windows 7 on a PC are extremely similar and do many of the same things.
But they're so compatible. In other words, 10 or 15 years ago, if you wanted Windows, if you wanted word processing, you had to choose a Mac program. Now, Windows is in both platforms, both worlds. You know, for example, I'll ask you this: we at our office, we've got about 14 or 15 workstations, and we're PC. And about 10 years ago, when we did a retrofit, I asked the technician who was doing the installing. I said, how hard would it be for me to have for my workstation or laptop to be a Mac? And his eyes kind of glazed over. We did a refit 2 years ago, and the technician said, not a big deal. What has changed that allows that compatibility now?
There's a couple of things that have changed. One is that Apple has now adopted the Intel chip as its core processing, and this is something that has been in the PC world for some time. And so that increased compatibility. As George said, the graphical interface has become much more common. The devices, the interchangeability of USB devices and other things that you can plug into these computers. But you've also found that, like in the Apple world, you can run PC software on the Mac, and it isn't just emulating it. It is the program, whether it's older XP or whether it is the newest Windows 7. You can run it in a window, and if you have multiple screens plugged in, you can run one program on one screen, one on another, and you can copy and paste back and forth. there's a lot of compatibility, and I think that those bridges have been built on purpose to really improve the user's experience in being able to get the most out of their computer.
And Tom has it exactly right. It was the Intel chip, and it's also the ability of when Apple went to the Intel chip that software developers could now write common applications that would work on both platforms. So they may change the way it looks a little bit on a Mac to match that Mac look, but basically they're using the same core software to be able to give you a Microsoft Word on the PC like you have Microsoft Word on the Mac.
In the old days, you go to Barnes & Noble or someplace and look at the computer section, and there'd be the Mac section, and there would be the Windows section or the PC section. Not true anymore,
No.
really. You know, we think in terms of Macintosh computers and the club and the history of Macintosh computers, very interesting. But a few things have happened in the last few years that have been their own mini revolutions. I think I would point to this little guy here, where am I? Here we go. You know, the iPhone, of course, it has its competitors in the world. There are other smartphones. But in terms of the acceptability of a Macintosh product, especially by the younger generation. I mean, we're going to continue with our habits and do what we need to do. But my kids and your kids, that's the age group that are actually going to be buying things, you know,
yes.
in the next 10 years. They are very comfortable with the Macintosh name, and I think it's because of the iPhone. Talk about iPhones and smartphones just for a minute. What's going on there?
Well, as you said, smartphones were nothing new when the iPhone came along 4 years ago, but it really revolutionized the approach to smartphones and the user interface. And that's one of the things that Apple in the last 25 years has really focused in on, is making sure that the user, the person who is operating that device, finds it intuitive, finds it easy to use, finds it touchable. And to a point where you don't actually need a manual to have to be able to pick up. So
it's hard to find a manual for these things.
it's very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And I think it also, I mean, it started a little bit before the iPhone. I mean, it started when Apple came out with the iPod first, you know. It was the iPod that the kids really wanted.
That's right.
Because they could carry their music with them all the time. And it was so much better than carrying a deck of CDs like people used to do. They could carry their music with them.
We saw the convergence of other kinds of devices like the Palm Pilot and other kinds of touchable things that began to bring together. And the thing that the iPhone did was to integrate a camera, a tape recorder, movies, photos, all kinds of apps, over 300,000 apps. And then it leapfrogged from there into the much larger model, which is now called the iPad.
The iPad.
Yeah, and I think the real thing that I think Apple changed with the iPhone was that it was the new stylus that they developed for the iPhone. I mean, the specialized stylus that works so well with an iPhone called the finger. I mean, people just really, before this, a smartphone, you had to have a little pin that you pulled out of your phone and tap on the screen with. But Apple came up with an interface design that you could use your finger to touch the screen that made it so much more intuitive. If you want to do something, you just point at it, and that's the ease of it.
We're going to close out, and I'm going to put the pressure on. We just got a couple of minutes, but real quickly, each of you tell me one thing that's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years that's going to be different, either a product or a trend. Put you on the spot. Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I think convergence, you're going to see more and more convergence. You're going to see these devices like iPads and iPhones and everything all come together centrally to be a single device that people carry with them all the time. I mean, we believe that people carry a smartphone or a phone with them all the time. I think you're going to carry a lot more than that with you as we move down the line.
Tom?
I agree with George totally, and I think that this will get thinner and thinner and may even become a sheet of paper that rolls up and it's still touchable. And that the audience is going to broaden because this is ideal for an elderly population today. We have much to look forward to.
Well, we don't have time to talk about it, but cloud computing, where you don't really do computing here, it's all stored somewhere else. Pretty exciting stuff. We'll have you guys back and maybe give you some more time to talk about the future. That's fun.
Okay, thank you.
George, Tom, and congratulations on a great history of the Apple Jac Club. What a great community resource. folks at home, thanks again for spending a little time with us again. Capital City Matters. We'll be back next month with something interesting for sure. Take care.